I'm trying to platinum Diablo 2 Resurrected, and one of the challenges that I have to beat is to reach level 99 on a hardcore character. Therefore, I'm playing through hardcore with every single character on the PS5 to see which one is the safest, starting with...
Say my name.
Ah yes, the Necro. Now I recently did a Bone Mancer, so it only makes sense to go fishy here. That and also because it is often lauded as the safest build in Diablo 2, and for good reason. Thus, when we reach the den and reach level 2, we will be putting our first skill point into Teeth. Now before you shower me with comments of potential blasphemy, it is technically a part of the build since it is a prereq of Corpse Explosion, and it is an excellent source of AoE that you can use to clear the den. Doing so, I reached level 3 and put a point into Ray Skeleton, actually mentioning the poor guy for the first time in this build video. Don't feel too sorry for him though, since he and his boys are gonna be the stars of the show as I put the point that Akara gave me for the den in Skeleton Mastery. Early game with this guy is to really just find the perfect balance of Ray Skeleton and Skeleton Mastery, and that perfect balance is often just achieved by putting points in these alternatively, as Skeleton Mastery will give you higher returns in terms of skeleton stats, whereas Ray Skeletons will give you more skeletons. Now I deliberated on killing Bloodraven in a long and arduous battle because I wanted to add another minion to my party. I gave her a longbow for increased physical damage. With that ranged attacking power, we killed Rakanishu safely and got another point into Skeleton Mastery. At level 6, I got a point into Corpse Explosion. Not strictly optimal. I should have waited till level 7 and got amp damage, which I got at that level. This gave me another bind for my square button other than Teeth, and what's more, CE works way better with this applied on the monsters. At level 9, I got another point into Ray Skeleton and Skeleton Mastery at level 10. I also started putting points in strength to equip some gear, mainly aiming for 30 strength for potential faster run walk chain boots. At level 11, I went for the extra skeleton with a point in Ray Skeleton. Level 12 I reached as soon as I got the runes that I needed from the Countess, brought another summon to the party with Clay Golem. This guy was to serve a pretty specific purpose, and at level 13 I put a point into Iron Maiden to set it in stone. Iron Maiden strats for Andariel. I bought this wand from Akara before I went and faced her, and it could have gone better. The problem was that my skeletons annoyingly got stuck in the other room, facing infinitely spawning Fallens while I was left to defend my life with Clay Golems and Iron Maiden. I mean, I really can't complain since those were the strats, but Andariel was not exactly cooperating, using her poison spray more so than her physical attacks, which is not reflected back by Iron Maiden. Once I raised a couple skeletons though, she died comically fast. I got an Act 2 prayer mercenary, and by literally using him to his full potential, I reached level 14 outside the hole. I kid, but inside the hole is where his potential will be realized. That is because the best strat in this place is to unsummon all your minions so that they don't end up blocking the way of your merc and use amp damage and Corpse Explosion. I reached level 16 and continued the alternating of minion skills. Reaching level 17, I could run faster thanks to the stealth, and for arcane, I used the tech as for the maggot. I did my Radaman quest to get another point into Ray Skeleton and to get an extra skeleton before Duriel. That was of course beneficial as that would give me an extra Iron Maiden target for the bug to hit. Doing this fight without Iron Maiden would be an absolute pain, but thankfully these strats exist to make this fight quite chill. Pun very much intended. Now I got an Act 3 mercenary when I got there, since it is a trophy, only to take 2 steps into the wilderness and realizing the error of my ways. Yeah, I think we will just stick with Jamali for this one. I killed Sark in his lair and reached level 18, getting another point in Skeleton Mastery. What I really wanted to reach was level 19 before the Flare Jungle to add fire res to my stats with a Ral helmet. I reached level 20 in the jungle killing strays. The next few levels, however, for me will be earned in a static place, that being Serena's Temple in the Bazaar. That is because I planned on doing players 5 runs of this place to get to level 24. This is to make sure that I'm not underleveled going into some hard areas of chaos, and also to allow me to use a teleport staff which will help me hop walls in places like the sewers. The skill action was surprisingly different than just putting Ray Skeleton and Skeleton Mastery alternatively, as I got the prereqs for Decrepify to get the curse at level 24, getting me ready for Mephisto. Well, I don't need Decrepify for him per se, but it sure does help slowing him down, especially with a Clay Golem. Oh yeah, if you're wondering how I got the mages, this is actually a different Necro. I lost the recording on mine because I'm a pro like that. What I had was a little bit of the recording of the Diablo fight. Enough though to show you that more than a lizard, Diablo is a giant bitch. Now I don't draw the B word that often, but because of his reprehensible acts like this one, and yes, I said acts, plural, he really earned it in this one. When he wasn't one-shotting my army as soon as I entered the TP, the general strat was to get Decrepify on him and Clay Golem on the side for ultra slow-mo shots. This is a fight I would say that you need Decrepify for. Diablo is way too scary otherwise. At the very least, he had the courtesy to drop an all-res Ami for me at the end of it all. Nothing to write home about, but I was still quite relieved that the most stressful fight of the game was over now. Thus I chilled out with my old friend Eldritch and reached level 27, getting another point in race skeleton and adding another skeleton along the way. I also used the cube recipe to create a savage polearm for my mercenary, which gives him damage. With that damage, I went to smack some barbarians. I weighed Decrepify versus amp damage for this fight, but ended up just going with the latter, seeing the damage numbers against Koralik. I didn't want to use Decrepify against Talik as it will only make his whirlwinds more potent. Trust me, that's how that works. So I stuck with amp on him and Decrepified Madoc until he was the only one left and then finished him with amp. I reached level 28 while attempting to kill the Lister pack. Keyword being attempting. They ended up destroying my whole army and I led them out, but really looking at this, you could probably tell that if I stuck by it, I could have gotten him down. Against Bill, there was no doubt. Decrepify plus Clay Golem makes it so that he can't jump around and that slow assault on him takes him out of commission eventually. Before entering Nightmare, I made myself an Ancient's Pledge and a 3 open socket kite shield and respec to equip it. This also gave me an opportunity to invest more into Corpse Explosion, wherein I invested 5 hard points to get a greater radius as it is going to become more of a focus in my offense going forwards. That being said, my skill point at level 30 still goes to Skeleton Mastery since maxing these 2 skills is still the prio and Ray Skeleton gets the point at 31. After that, I did a lot of Countess runs, like an unhealthy amount to get this gear. White, which I made in a +3 Ray Skeleton Bone Wand, Lore, Ort Sol for the extra skill point and 30 lightning res, Stealth, AP, MF Amulet, Tri-Res Boots, All-Res Right Ring, Demonite Sash for the 4 rows, Dual-Res Ring, and CTC Frost Nova Gloves. These have saved my lives a handful of times since Act 2 normal. Skill build at level 41 has 19 base points in Race Skeleton, 14 base points in Mastery. After the 40 damage mark, Race Skeleton becomes strictly better to put your points in, and thus I have more in it than Mastery. 9 total in CE, 8 in Bone Armor, and 1 hit wonders of Clay Golem, amp damage, and decrep. I reached level 42 before Andariel and max Race Skeleton. With my 10 skeletons and decrep, Andariel was no problem. Even though I didn't do anything wacky like put a point in Fire Golem, the fight still went pretty good. Mostly thanks to me getting my Merc a strength. That crushing blow helps as early as you can get it, no matter what the base, and it shows in the boss fights. Prior to this, I have tried to make the Act 5 Merc work, but with might, anything other than the Desert Merc is strictly worse. Level 43 onwards, I started maxing Skeleton Mastery. Good thing that I'm spending all these points on these guys. Surely they would pay it back in the Duriel fight and not stand and ignore me and the giant cold bug, right? Now yes, there were those couple of loners who just wouldn't play with the class no matter what, but enough about me and my issues. Duriel still went down thanks to team play and quite a lot of legwork put in by the mercenary. More into Skeleton Mastery at level 45 and we move. There isn't a set level grinding spot in Nightmare. I just kill boss packs with Corpse Explosion and get to 46 to get another point into Mastery. Mephisto is quite straightforward and easy. Most of these bosses are with Decrepify, Clay Golem, and crushing blows from the strength, so nothing special to see. Until the drops. Unique Battle Boots. War Trap, boys. Not something I want to use right now? Well, scratch that. I definitely do want to use them. I mean, who could say no to 41 MF, but the strength requirement is much higher and I think I would be better off with the res boots for now. Thus, I will save him in the shared stash to be used by the eventual level 99 character. Potentially. For me, it is all about damage and defense for now, and I maxed Skeleton Mastery at level 47 and got Summon Resist from the Izzy skill points. I got a Lum from the Hellforge. I wanted an but in this case, I guess I'll take the L. Please don't leave. That is because Chaos is next. CS was filled with curses flying off in the air and corpse explosions covering the volcanic crust that holds the magma chamber that is Diablo's resting ground. Can you tell somebody has been spending a lot of time on Goodreads recently? What that entails is that reg monsters are easy with boom boom damage and Diablo goes down after I get a point in Ray Skeletal Mage at level 48. Quite like any other boss, thanks to him being completely immobilized with the combination of cold damage, Clay Golem, and Decrepify, and his best attack, the Lightning Hose, being ineffective due to intentional game design. What he dropped me was a Peasant Crown. Not quite as exciting like the Mephisto drop, but definitely potentially potentially useful, especially socketed with a res rune to replace lore. I leveled just before the ancients and put a point into blood golem, which, quite like my previous point in skeletal mage, is merely a prereq for revives. Mages I can still see myself using, but clay golem is just too good for CC to give up, something that you can see in the ancients fight as well. During my usual precarious balancing act of cursing Talik with Amp and the other two with Decrep, I tried to stick the golem on the ones that I wanted to slow. Talik actually gets in more hits with Whirlwind if I do it to him, so I'm only too happy to stick Amp on him and get him down first. However, the skeletons and more importantly the mercenary were eager to take out Korlik. Wherever the mercenary goes, there goes the brunt of my damage, and thus I amped him so that they could be finished with him soon and take care of our little whirlwinding problem. One thing that I was proud about was that almost all my summons survived the fight, and it was only going to get better as I put a point into Iron Golem. Not something that I would be using, but something that I would be glad about when I put the skill point from the next level in Revive. Now Revive is a great skill, but I think I got carried away a little by putting a few too many points in it during the Bale runs. What I should have been doing is what I'm doing right now, putting them into Corpse Explosion. Since revives have a 3-minute timer on them anyways, having to revive more than 6 or 7 of these every time can be very tedious, and thus the extra points usually just end up sitting there doing nothing. CE on the other hand is becoming my primary focus of offense as I reached level 67 while doing some Hell Countess runs and put another point into it. Those Hell Countess runs netted me the following gear that I used in Hell difficulty. The White Wand is the same since it provides insane value for a Dolan IO rune. I switched out the armor from stealth to smoke to go more defensive focused with 50 all res, following in similar footprints as my Ancient's Pledge with 48 all res. I did change out my lore because I found this awesome jewel with 14 all res and I stuck that in my Peasant Crown, making it possibly my favorite part of the build. My amulet follows suit with 25 all res. My boots is where I tried to bring some of the faster run walk I lost from stealth. My ring is identical to Nightmare since I didn't find anything better. Belt is something with a little res, and for the gloves I found some chances, and since I didn't really need any more res or other stats, just stuck these on as a good luck charm going forwards. An equally important part of my build is my mercenary. That is because he's the source of might aura, which gives all my minions 190% damage increase. To keep him alive, I still have the crappy old strength on him, mainly because I never ended up finding a better base for him, but it surprisingly still sustains him. To help with that, I put a Tretch on him, giving him attack speed and fade, which makes him nigh unkillable. His helmet is just my old lore because what else was I gonna do with this thing? I lost the recording of me killing Helen Dariel, but here's me reaching level 71 wherein I continue to put more points into Corpse Explosion. In Tar Rasha's tomb I recruited some gore bellies to join the fight against evil, and we smite the evil bug with some crushing blow justice. As you can see, some ogres were roaming around aimlessly. Telestomping on console is basically impossible due to the lack of granular control of where you want to teleport as you get with the mouse and keyboard. Thus, this is the best that we get, and it is still a very good best. I leveled twice before Mephisto in the Marsh and in Serena's Temple and dedicated it to Corpse Explosion for all the love and support it has given me and for always believing in me. Maybe those should have been in Summon Resist, as in Trab my army was falling left and right to all the elemental damage flying around. So much so that I had to single out the Trab members and take them out one by one. Good god, what am I, a barbarian? Well, I don't think that a barbarian can do this to Mephisto, even one of the new leap attack ones. The man will simply be outnumbered. Again, with me not being able to telestomp sort of takes away from the spectacle of what the revives are capable of, but still it is plenty to get the message across. Now, to remedy the resistance problem that my bros were having, I put the easy skill points into summon res to get them all up to 44 all res. This skill point from level 74, therefore I was able to invest into bone armor for more physical damage absorption. Every bit counts as chaos was up next. The strat here was simple. I let the boys in and caused a little bit of destruction to get a couple corpses built up. This way, when I let the big boys out, all I have to do is throw a couple of amp damage curses out and Corpse Explosion, which at this point was sitting at level 22, took care of the rest. As far as taking care of Diablo is concerned, yeah. I even had my own town portal right next to him, in effect basically telestomping him as soon as I came out. Poor guy. Never stood a chance. But let us not start feeling sorry for the enemy quite yet, because the scariest act is up next. Thus, every which way I went, I had to take it slow and easy and also play safe. Thus, I reached level 75 before the Ancients and got myself more physical damage absorbed with bone armor. Not that I needed much of that in this fight. I had a wall of revives between me and the barbarians. See, this is what I'm talking about with having diminishing returns with revives. Having more, I don't think would have made that much of a difference, since these are enough to shield me from any incoming damage, and they themselves themselves are bumping into each other, trying to go on the offensive. Now, because it took a couple of tries to get a good Ancients roll, by the time Talik was down, their 3-minute timer had run out, and thus I had to tackle Madoc with just the OG army. Thankfully, I had kept the Merc healthy, and thus his crushing blow came in clutch in this fight. Thus, we end with actually being able to kill Helllister, albeit with an almost destroyed party, and after a long and arduous battle. In a very much less so of an arduous battle, I beat Bale to finish this journey. This was my second Necro, and as I mentioned previously as well, my first died in an accident of impatience. But this one really stuck it out. And now it is time for the safety score. Starting with the skills, the Summon Mancer gets some really good defensive options for personal safety directly in the form of bone armor, and of course plenty of minions to keep his distance between the enemies, and he gets a 10 out of 10. For stats, the Necro is frail as it gets, getting only 2 life points per vitality, and they also start out with very low strength, thus taking from the points that you would want to put into life, giving them a 1 out of 10. Gear dependency is debatable. People laud that you can do the Summon Mancer naked, but you would probably not enjoy it, especially in hardcore. Still, it is very much possible with offenses and defenses holding their own, and he gets a 9 out of 10. Danger proximity is low. As mentioned, the man stands behind a wall of minions in most situations to the point that damage can't even get to him. And even if it does, he has bone armor as another layer of separation from where his life pool starts draining, and he gets a 9 out of 10. Escapability is poor. The Necro is notoriously slow, not getting any movement skills. The FCR breakpoints for teleporting away are decent enough, but the FHR breakpoints are quite horrid, and he gets a middling 4 out of 10. Speed is bad, only one way to put it. The Summon Mancer is slow and often sticks around in one place for a long time, thus increasing the exposure of monsters from around him, or really just making the player impatient and make a mistake which could cause their death, and he gets a 2 out of 10. The normal experience is okay, about average, slightly below if I'm honest, because the Necro's best tool in the form of Corpse Explosion doesn't start shining till Nightmare difficulty when the monster's HP increases, and thus he gets a 4 out of 10. Nightmare is better, especially if you can get a white one, which really puts the playthrough up a gear or two, and as you progress through the difficulty, additional points in Corpse Explosion start paying out dividends, and this gets him a 7 out of 10. Hell is excellent. Not only is the gear dependence from Hell Countess not strictly necessary, but the skills really do come into their own, with Corpse Explosion clearing the screen and Revives clearing all bosses, and he gets a 9 out of 10. Finally, suitability for 99. Well, everything considered, the Necro does excellently in the defense department with the giant shield of minions which will defend him in that long journey. But that journey will be long, because the Necro is slow, and it is highly doubtable that with any build he can take on monsters above players 1 in the later stages of the game. He gets a 2 out of 10. Add that up and the Necro gets a safety score of 57 out of 100. That lands the Necromancer on the top of my list. A very prestigious position, but I think the fact that he's the only one on there might have had something to do with that. Let's see if the next character can dethrone him.
You're gonna get me off, right?
Don't let your high school girlfriend 5 fingers no waiting take away from the fact that we are looking at one of the best assassins west of the Mississippi. Thus, I put all my faith in her and put the players on 8 right away from the get-go. This makes the monsters tankier, sure, but also allows me to reach level 2 by just killing 3 Fallens and a rat. Through that, I could put point into Fire Blast, which is a trap skill. Traps are good in the early game, but not quite just as yet, as I punch some more monsters to get to level 3. There will come a time though where melee would have to be let go, and thus I invested more in traps. Another thing I did was to equip a dagger, which is a faster base than the claws you start off with. Using that, I could throw my fire blasts quicker to dispatch of corpse fire in the den. I completed that quest on players 1 because of the fire resistant fallen in here, and put the players back on 8 and went into putting points into claw mastery at level 5 to prepare for burst of speed at 6. From there, it was a race to level 12 as I put the points into fire blast to keep up with the steeply increasing difficulty at players 8. Paid out big time though, since by the time I was on my first tower run, I could put a point into Wake of Fire. Things got a lot easier from there as passive XP started flying in from me just by putting a trap down and running. I didn't need to do much of that in the tower, as I remembered to put the players down to 1 while facing the Countess, and so she gave me all the runes I wanted in 2 runs. To be fair, I didn't ask for much, just a stealth to run faster and a leaf for that damage. Now, since I was pretty set in that department, I started getting points into burst of speed, going up to 5 to get more faster run walk and IAS. I could swing that easily as experience was not in short order, and I was able to wear stealth before Andario. Farewell, my love. That was players 8, Andy, by the way. Girl just can't handle that heat. Getting the image of Endariel in a bathing suit out of my mind, I reached level 19 in Act 2 to level up the form of my girl with the leaf staff. This adds to the damage of my Wake of Fire for open areas and Fire Blast for Maggot Lair. Leveling in Act 2 was pretty standard with only P8 all the way. My Wake of Fire was at level 15 and I was at level 24 while fighting Duriel. How to melt a bug.mkv, boys. He can be an incredibly annoying fight otherwise with his Holy Freeze. Another thing that is annoying is Act 3, mostly because you have to do tedious leveling runs. Well, not anymore. With this leveling route, I was zooming past areas making XP blade over claw. I did put the players down to 1 for Trav because these guys don't F around and I will keep it at that from here on out in normal. That is because after these guys it is Mephisto and no point prolonging this fight for no reason. Act 4 follows and so does fire resistant monsters and thus any advantage I can have over these guys is welcome. Ooh, a reward for my perils. All told, I face normal Diablo at level 26. Amidst all the leveling, it is easy to forget that this is a hardcore run. Normal Diablo is here to remind us of that. At least I could face him at a safe distance. The next level I got just before the Ancients and one just after them. The fight itself was what you might imagine. The normal Ancients one is quite unimaginative with a standard smattering of offense spam, Maddock dying first due to low base HP and the Ancient with the highest resistance to your element lasting the longest. Korlik managed to overstay his welcome here though with his airborne capabilities, but nothing to cause concern. Normal Lister did that a little bit, well that's mainly because I decided to be stubborn and kill him. Was it worth it? You tell me, but that is a serious bragging right for the assassin, albeit at level 29. Against the much less tankier seeming Lord of Destruction, I use Fire Blast in conjunction with Wake of Fire to rain fire damage at him from top and bottom to get him down quickly. We return to your regularly scheduled programming of P8 experience farming as my assassin reached level 30 to start off Nightmare. Maybe I could have done P8 in Act 5 as well since fire resistance are few and far between, at least before the throne, but we are here now and it is still plenty to keep us going and we are only going up. Now since I am doing all characters SSF, Nightmare Countess was a place where I spent a considerable amount of my time. The fruits of the runes that I farmed from here will come into play later, but for now we're jumping into Act 2 because I am a terrible filmmaker and I forgot to hit that record button while fighting Endariel. Here's a recreation. Here though you can see one of the things I got from the Countess session. Well, a lot of experience as I reached level 50 after downing Dark Elder, but that Insight Merc is what I was referring to, something that helps me stay on top of my mana. Another trinket that I picked up during my travels was a Wand of Lower Resistance, something that gives me access to the Necro Curse of lower res in terms of charges on a wand which allows me to lower my enemies' resistances by 31%.
Duriel found out firsthand what that feels like. My guess? It probably burns. That is going to continue in Act 3 but no further since this is the last act that I would be staying Wake of Fire. Thus I tried to make the most of it and rack up all the passive XP that I could. That meant staying at player's 8 for the most part except for areas like the Spider Cavern and sewers where it would be more trouble than it's worth. Same with Trav and the same with Mephisto, who I forgot to film, so here's a little recreation. What I did remember to film was the respec. That's good because it had a couple of interesting things going on, like me getting more strength and dex than usual because I wanted to wield a long sword Spirit. Now the Spirit part is par for the course, but the choice of the base is strictly for high attacking frames. For skills I went for 5 hard and burst of speed. I also got a point in Cloak of Shadows and Mind Blast. These you can get before as well, especially Cloak of Shadows, but Act 4 Nightmare onwards monsters really start getting scary and thus these will be an integral part of my attack along with Lightning Sentry and Death Sentry. You can see I only put 5 hard points into the latter. Unlike the olden days, Death Sentry is no longer a synergy for Lightning Sentry and thus having more points into it is no good since yes, Corpse Explosion is awesome, but you're better off creating those corpses in the first place. Thus I put the points into Shockweb and Charge Bolt Sentry. The former I use even in my offense as it does a surprising amount of damage. Mind Blast is essential for CC, not just for conversions but also for staggering enemies as I whiz past them. Now I did do Acts 4 and 5 on players 1. I could have easily swung Act 4 on P3 and Act 5 up to P6 but decided to be conservative to play it safe on hardcore. All told I killed Bale at level 62 which was pretty solid based on my previous experiences of only players 1, but it could have been higher. That is still pretty okay since I do plan on doing some Hell Countess runs to gear up for Hell and I could just get the rest of the levels that I think I would need to finish Hell. Thus I put the players on level 3 and brave the world of Hell difficulty. It could have started better, that is with a non-lightning enchanted corpse fire. Yes I know, cue all the comments of all the rune words I should have built to keep my mercenary alive. I pushed him into corpses and killed him anyways, don't worry about it. The value you get from 1 point in Mind Blast is honestly pretty insane. You might be wondering how I deal with lightning immunes in Hell? Well, I don't. I simply use Mind Blast to convert one of the cronies and that's enough. Turns out there's one thing the monsters hate more than heroes. Rats. Flippin' HBO should make a show about them. There are a fair few of those lightning immunes in Act 1, the ones in the tower being archers. Word to the wise, cast Cloak of Shadows as soon as you see them, and for the love of God, don't fight them past Jinmei. Other than that, the tower gives good XP and also runes to get final hell gear like Spirit, Lore, Rhyme to replace Ancient's Pledge for the Cannot Be Frozen, and Smoke to replace Stealth and get a lot of the lost res from AP back, and a bunch of other stuff which is honestly just holding my assassin together, other than these dual res boots which are nice for hardcore. Holding together, I leveled up in Maggot Lair. Not to say I killed a lot of monsters in here, this is a rare clip of me fighting in a large-ish room. Needless to say, at this point I had players down at 1 as I was already at level 71. That level 71 I carried all the way to Talwash's chamber. The assassin is a semi-decent boss killer with lightning fury and lower resistance. As I mentioned before, she does benefit from adding shockweb to her final arsenal, but I just wasn't at the liberty to do so in the fight against the bug. Speaking of Act 3, the liberty to do most things is stripped away from you in this hellhole filled with lightning immunes. It also doesn't help that these lightning immunes are not exactly friendly and will shred your face apart if you don't keep up with Mind Blast conversions to get them off your back. The same principle carries forward in Act 4, only the friendliness is a bit improved with the floaty boys being a little more annoying than dangerous, a trade that any hardcore player would take in a heartbeat. The dangerous is still present in a respectable quantity though. Infector and his boys not only make your claustrophobic nightmares a reality, but also are resistant to lightning damage and thus take longer to kill. Longer than Vizier, I would wager. That is because you can dispatch of him quite effectively with the use of some nearby corpses. Against Diablo, the standard formula of lower res and lightning traps works a treat. Just be careful if he Uno reverses and ends up trapping you, since you will not have a telestaff to rescue you at this point. Now the entire point of Act 5 is to not do anything dumb and stay alive for the 2 big fights coming up. First up, Ancients. Now getting a good roll on the brothers can be a tedious job, but it is something that is well worth it, since a bad roll of an extra lightning immunity on Talik and Korlik could leave you SOL for the fight. A roll like Cursed on any of them could leave you SOL for the whole character, so take your time and get it right. Once you do, the goal is to lower res behind you and lay traps while running. This will take care of Talik and Korlik. Bonus tip, don't settle for an extra fast Talik. You deserve better than that, trust me. Once it is just you and Maddock left in the dance, you could either get him stuck behind some pillar, lower res him, and lay traps that damage him while you are invulnerable as he keeps hitting the obstacle. This works great on PC, but can be a pain in the ass on console because of aiming shenanigans, so I just found the good old running, lower res behind, and traps in front strat works just as well on him. Finally, there is but one obstacle left. Bail. Or you could die right at the entrance of the throne. Hardcore is fun. Well, maybe it was a good thing because the second time around, this happened. And this happened. And also, this happened. Worth it? Well, you tell me, because either way we are finishing up with our girl while she finishes off Hell Lister like it's nobody's business, and yeah, that death was unfortunate. However, don't know if you can tell, but this definitely was a much different experience than that of the Summonmancer. To find out whether it was better or worse, we're gonna have to go to the safety score. Starting with the skills, the assassin doesn't get the full Batman utility best of safety features that the Necro gets, but she definitely gets the second best. Utility skills that are actually useful in the form of Mind Blast and Cloak of Shadows and other stuff that I didn't even end up using, like Fade and meat shields like Shadow Master, and she gets an 8 out of 10. The stats are really good on the assassin. She's one of the blessed characters, getting 4 life per vitality point and pretty decent strength and dex to start out, and she gets an 8 out of 10. Gear dependency is low. Along with Summonmancer, I believe that Trapson is one of the only other builds that is lauded to be able to done gear free, with skills like BOS and Fade taking care of the stats for you, and she gets an 8 out of 10. Danger proximity is low as well. Even without using meat shields, which are the traditional way to distance yourself from enemies, the attacking style of traps is very lay down and run, maybe even lay down one screen over with Mind Blast as an additional tool to push monsters away that get too close, and she gets a 9 out of 10. Escapability is decent. The assassin has excellent FHR frames to break out of stuns, modest FCR frames to teleport away, and burst of speed is an option to increase run walk and dash out of sticky situations, as it gets a 7 out of 10. Speed is excellent. I would only expect a character with access to unlimited teleports to be faster, since I was able to be normal, nightmare, and hell all in 3 days with this girl after a 9 to 5, getting her a 9 out of 10. The normal experience is amazing. Traps start shining early on and shine bright all throughout the difficulty, not slowing even a little at the highest player's difficulties, and she gets a 10 out of 10. Nightmare slows a bit, especially after the respec, but it is pretty decent. Leveling with Wake of Fire is excellent till you can keep it, but fire damage starts lagging after Act 4 on where lightning damage becomes strictly better as a damage choice, and she gets a 7 out of 10. Hell is worse. Immunes plague most of the areas that you can go, and even though you have the gift that keeps on giving in the form of Death Sentry, it doesn't really hold a candle to the forms of damage with much fewer immunes like physical and magic, and she gets a 5 out of 10. Finally, suitability for 99. Now I know I'm only 2 characters in, but I think I may have found her, folks. The speed is what really astonished me with her. Not only how fast she moves, but how fast she clears. Beating the entire game in 3 days is a big deal when leveling to 99, because if in that grind I end up dying, and I will end up dying somewhere, having to only waste 3 days to get back to the grind is really appealing, especially adding all the other benefits of defenses that I mentioned earlier. The build to go with her would be Mosaic, which will need some gear support, so we will see, but it is looking strong as she gets a 9 out of 10, ending up with a total of 80 out of 100, blowing the Necromancer out of the water in comparison. People are going to be angry. Hope you like this. Yours truly, with love.